Welcome to your left-handed bandit mobile paint party experience. In this painting, we will be actively painting a Christmas wine glass. This is a very simple few color painting. We're gonna jump right into it. Even though our canvas only has a few colors, mainly black, red, and white, we have other color options available in your kit just in case you want to spice things up or add your own touch of things, which I can show you towards the end of this tutorial. However, for the first few steps of the painting, we will be using just red, black, and white, but in your kit, you should have the following supplies. You should have two paintbrushes, a average size flat paintbrush. You should have a sponge brush of some sort. You should have a paper towel or a napkin. You should have an apron that came with your kit. You should have a pre-plotted canvas with the design already sketched on, and you should have a plate of paint. Your kit came with 6 colors. Get yourself a plate or something flat and disposable and put those colors on that plate or keep them in the cups. It's your choice. We have the colors red, black, yellow, purple, white, and blue. So 6 colors. Depending on what route you decide to take, you may have your own easel. You may have rented an easel for my services. But if you do not have an easel is not a deal breaker, you may go ahead and use either a textbook, encyclopedia, or lean your painting against something nice and heavy like a sauce jar or a wall of some sort, depending on where your table placement is. Something that may be very, very helpful and necessary in this painting is a cup of water. So get yourself a cup of water as well. The cups are not included with the kits, but a cup of water is going to do you some extreme justice. So make sure you have all those items in your kit. I'm going to jump right into it. The awesome thing about these mobile paint party experiences are that you may pause this video, you may rewind this video in order for yourself or whoever may be painting with you to catch up, or simply rewind so that these steps can be repeated. But even as I'm going through these steps, I will be repeating different things as well. So jumping into it, I'm going to remove my sample. This is what your pre-plotted canvas should look like. And I'm going to take my sponge brush and I'm going to go right into my black paint. You don't necessarily have to dip the sponge brush in water. You can go right for the black paint. I'm going to take some black paint and I'm going to begin by outlining my piece of art with some black paint. So I'm going to work my way around. Here and there I can leave a little bit of space in between that black background and where my wine glass is going to be. So I'm painting in my background. For now, I'm going to stay away from the wine glass. But if you get close like I was here, that's okay. But if you do get close, just leave a little bit of space in between your background and your wine glass. I'm going to get this entire background, fill it with black paint. I'm going to be careful not to have any globs of paint. So if you see any excess buildup of black paint on your canvas, just go ahead and smooth those over just like I'm doing right now. So globs of black paint, smoothing those over, entire black from the background. If you like, you can paint the sides and the edges. Just be careful as you may be adjusting your canvas in just a few and you don't want to get any paint on your hands because that'll leave a really messy job. So it's up to you if you want to paint the sides of your canvas with this black. I encourage you to wait until the end of the painting just so that, again, you won't get any paint on your hands. So I'm going to get as much of the canvas as I can. I'm going to lift the canvas just slightly so that I can get this very, very bottom edge right here. Again, smooth globs of paint, no buildup. That's going to slow us down later on. Going to put that right back on in there and continue with the other side of the painting. I am left-handed, but when it comes to purposes of this canvas here and there, I can become ambidextrous. So you may notice that I'm switching to my right hand. Please don't do what I do. Please just use whatever dominant hand that you have. So we are just simply filling in the background. We're coming close to the Santa hat and the wine glass, but I'm leaving just a little bit of space for now because for that part of the painting, I'm going to switch brushes in just a second so that I can get more comfortably in those areas with paint. So again, coming kind of close. Now I have my entire background filled in with black paint. You will notice that there will be streaks of white peeking through the background, and that's fine for now. We can get those streaks later on, because we're gonna have to layer up to make sure that this background is nice and full. So we will be layering up later on in the painting to make sure that we have a nice full black background. So from here, I'm going to pause on my sponge brush. You can either drop that in your cup of water, or you can lay it off to the side. I'm gonna drop mine in water for now, let it soak so I can clean it in case I need it later. I'm going to switch to my average size paintbrush. You can take your paintbrush, dip it in and out of your water real fast, swish it around, tap it on the edge of your cup, and then what you do with your paper towel is you dab both sides of that paintbrush off on your paper towel to get that excess water out of the bristles. With this paintbrush that's nice and clean for me that I've just dipped in water, I'm going to use this paintbrush to get closer to my actual wine glass structure and hat. So simply using this brush to come right to the very edge of my design. And I'm doing the Santa hat at the top first. Filling that on in. Coming right to the very edge, closing that all off. Sponge brush makes it a little bit harder to get to the edges, so we use these brushes for finer details and getting in tighter spaces. If you have other brushes at home or wherever you're painting from, I encourage you to switch it up if you'd like it. That makes your life a little easier. As I work my way towards the tighter spaces of this painting, I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to paint in between the spaces of my hat and my wine glass. I'm going to be careful not to go inside of my structures. If you do, it's okay. If you go inside just a little bit, just be real careful. I'm going to leave a little bit of space in between this outline of this wine glass and the background. So just a little bit of space. We're going to need this later to find our shape. So again, try to leave a little bit of space here and here between the background, the wine glass, so that later I can find my shape again. I'm going to fill in right behind where the wine sits in the glass. This is the background as well. Work my way around the wine itself. Leave a little bit of space in here for now. Continue focusing on filling in this background. And the reason we're starting off with black first is because, again, as I mentioned, we want to make sure that this black dries so that we can layer up later on in our process. Now we're using acrylic paint. Acrylic paint dries really, really fast, usually within 7 to 10 minutes. So by the time I get to other parts of this painting, this background should be nice and dry for me to go ahead and continue this piece and finish it up at certain parts. But you'll see in just a bit, it all makes sense. I'm going to leave a little bit of space as I make my way to the edge of the wine glass. Again, I want to be able to see the shape of the wine glass later as I'm going ahead and finishing my painting on the second half. So leaving a little bit of space in there, taking my time, getting in those gaps, be real careful. Try your best not to get your paint into the actual wine structure, into the actual hat structure. I'm going to add a few more streaks on the inside behind the wine. You can add a few more streaks on the outside, even right here already. This is already starting to dry up for me. It's not dry to the touch, but it's working its way there. So if you need to add a couple more touches to cover up some background, feel free to do that before we switch to this next step in just a second. But the final thing that I'm going to do with this black paint for now is this very edge. This is a transparent wine glass that we're going to be painting. So I'm going to paint in between that mark that we left earlier and surround our wine glass with some black background. So again, we are surrounding the wine itself. We're leaving a little bit of space in between so that we can find that space later on. And I'm going to close it off right about there, maybe tighten it up just a little bit. Now this is the part where if you need to rewind the video or pause the video before I go into this next part so that everybody painting can keep up. But this is what our canvases should be looking like so far. So again, take a quick second to add a few more strokes of paint here and there. I'm going to make sure that we are covering everything that we need to cover so that once this background dries, we can hit it with a second layer of paint and call it a day. I'm just adding a few more streaks, and from here I'm going to let that dry. So as you can see, I can still see most of my U outline on my wine glass. I can see the wine shape itself, and I can see my Santa hat. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to get ready to move to the next step, the next color, by simply taking my water and my paintbrush, swishing my paintbrush around in the water. I'm going to tap my paintbrush on the side of my cup. I'm going to dab both sides off on your paper towel. That's going to get rid of that excess water that is going to be inside your bristles. So with a nice cleanish paintbrush, I'm going to work on my wine, and I'm going to work on my Santa hat. So from here, I'm going to start with the Santa hat. For the Santa hat, I am using red paint, just a touch of red with that cleanish brush. And I'm going to go ahead and put a base layer of red in my Santa hat. And what I mean by base layer, this is referring to the same thing that we just did with our background. Acrylic paint not only dries fast, but acrylic paint needs more acrylic paint to switch to for it to work the best way. So I'm going to put a base layer of red on this Santa hat. I'm going to be careful and try my best not to touch that black in the background. If you do a little bit, it's not going to hurt. I'll show you how to make a shade in your red in just a few, but try your best not to touch that black background. Otherwise, it will bring in some tones and shades into the hat, which we'll do in just a bit, but let's hold off for just a second. So as you can see, I have my hat filled in with a nice solid layer of red paint. If you have any globs of red paint, smooth those out so that it's a nice even layer of paint. And that's just going to be our base layer. From here, we're going to check and make sure we got all those areas filled in. And the next red thing that we want to do is fill in our wine. So again, talking about base layers, we're going to fill in our wine with a base layer of red paint. Being very, very careful, trying our hardest not to touch that black paint that is still drying in our background, because that will mix and create darker tones, which is not a bad thing. I'll show you how to do that in just a few minutes. But I'm going to mix in that red, give it a nice, even, smooth layer of red paint. This is our wine. We're going to be careful and fill out the insides of our splashes. Now notice I got a little bit of black inside. It's not the end of the world if you get some black inside your red. Again, it will just make a tone. Just keep on painting. It'll automatically mix in. Just keep on going. Tighter areas like the smaller drop, play around with the direction of your brush. Turn it around a little bit so you can practice how to get that paint in those little areas. Now, just like the rest of my painting, you want to make sure that you have smooth applications of paint. Any globs of paint will slow your painting down. So we have our black background, which is really starting to dry already, even right here. So when I add my second layer of black, it's going to be nice and solid. We have our red hat filled in with the base layer of red, and we have our wine filled in with the base layer of red. Later on, you can add your own touches if you want to kind of switch up the color of your wine. But even if you start with the base layer of red paint for your wine, you can always add more colors in there and make it more of a Riesling or more of another type of wine. I'm no wine expert, but there are different colors of wines. I know it's not vast, but whites and red wines will be easy to make even if you have a red background. I'll show you how to do that later if you'd like. However, I'm going to switch the flow a little bit. I'm going to rinse that red paint out of my paintbrush by swishing it in the cup. Try not to bang your paintbrushes on the bottom of the cup. Tap your brush off on the edge of your cup. Dab both sides of your paintbrush off on your paper towel. Get that excess water out of the bristles so that no water will stream and drip down your canvas. From here, we're going to add a base layer of paint to my white. Now for this section, we're going to use white. And it may seem redundant to use white paint on a white background. However, This background is a raw, something called gesso layer. Gesso is the white stuff that they use to cover canvases. Usually canvases are off-white until they add this white acrylic gesso. We're going to use our white acrylic paint to add our base layer of white to the brim of the hat, the Santa Claus hat, as well as the puff at the end of the Santa Claus hat. So we're adding just a solid layer of red paint, of white paint, sorry about that. If a little bit of red paint mixes into your white paint, again, it's not the end of the world. Just keep on going. It's okay to have some tones mixed in there, but make sure it's a nice, smooth layer of white paint. Smooth it on out, no globs of paint. Bring it around, filling the entire Santa hat space. Smooth it on out. And then I'm going to go to the puffball and do the exact same thing. It's easier to work with this puffball because my black background is drying pretty well and pretty fast. Because as I mentioned, acrylic paint usually dries within 7 to 10 minutes. So now smooth those globs of paint out on my puffball. And now I got my base layers all filled in. So we're gonna do a few more things before we take a break on this painting. This is a very quick, simple, and easy painting. What I'm gonna do is start adding my tones to my painting that'll give it more of a intimate, more detailed look. So for these next steps, I'm going to still use my average size paintbrush. I'm gonna keep that white on the canvas, and I'm going to, from here, wipe the excess paint off on my paper towel. And with this white paint still being wet, I'm going to take just the tiniest, and when I say tiniest, I mean the tiniest amount of black paint, and I'm gonna add it into this hat. If we use too much black paint, then the brim of your hat is going to turn into a darkish gray or a black hat. So again, I am really expressing and encouraging you to just use a teeny bit of black paint for this next step. So with that white paint still wet on my canvas and a teeny bit of black paint on my paintbrush, I'm going to just go to the edge of the hat and add a streak of black, and it's going to automatically mix and make gray. I'm going to wipe the excess paint off on my paper towel, and I'm going to come back, hold your paintbrush in the middle. This is how we can delicately blend this paint together, and we're just going to go back and forth with that black paint, and it's going to mix and make gray, and it's going to add a tone. It's going to add a tone right to the edge of the hat, and it's going to make some detail and just make it look a little bit more detailed, a little bit more complex. I wouldn't say realistic, that's the wrong word to use, but it just puts more detail into your Santa's hat. So I got a light gray edge going. If it's not as dark as this, then you can take just a teeny bit more black, and again, just a little bit of black paint at a time, and then just repeat that step. Adding black to the very edge, wiping the excess off on your paper towel, and then going back again and mixing it all together. I'm gonna leave a little bit of white paint towards the center. I'm not gonna cover this entire thing with gray paint because that white's gonna pop. I got a little bit of red mixing in here too, but I'm not mad at it. So if you accidentally get some red mixed in, it's not the end of the world. If you don't like the red mixed in, you can always go back when that dries and take a little bit more gray paint and mix that in. So I got gray paint, a gray tone mixed into the brim of my Santa hat. The next thing that I'd like to do is take some gray and mix it into the puffball. So with that paint still being wet, and if your paint and your puffball is not wet, add just a little bit more white paint. And then I'm going to take just a touch of black paint, and just like we did in the brim, add a little bit of paint to the edge of that puffball, wipe the excess off, and then we're gonna blend it. It's gonna mix and make gray. I'm not gonna cover this entire puffball with gray paint. I'm gonna leave a little bit of white exposed. So that way you can see the detail in the puffball without the highlight being lost. So I have my puffball detail, I have my brim detail. The next thing I wanna do is add a little bit of a tone to the hat and the wine. So for this step, I'm going to rinse off my paintbrush. And if you need to pause this video or rewind, feel free to do so. I know I'm moving pretty fast, but this is just a mobile tutorial at the convenience of your home. I'm tapping my paintbrush on the edge of my cup. I'm dabbing both sides off on my paper towel to get the excess water out. And to the touch, this red is almost dry. So I'm gonna add another layer of red paint to this Santa hat. I'm gonna be careful not to go into the white and gray detail that I just painted. I'm gonna focus directly on the actual hat itself. Quickly adding another layer. It doesn't have to be perfect, but make sure that there's no globs of paint. I'm gonna add it to the hat first, and then after I add it to the hat, I'm gonna go into the wine in a few, because we painted these pretty much consecutively, so if one's dry, then the other is on its way to drying as well. So we got the hat with the fresh layer of red, and I'm going to give a fresh layer of red to the wine. No globs of paint, nice and smooth. Getting no splashes as well, don't forget those. Big splash and a little splash. Now we have a fresh layer of red paint. I'm going to wipe the excess red paint off of my paintbrush and onto my paper towel. I'm not dipping my paintbrush in water for this step. And what I'm going to do is, again, grab just a very small touch of black paint for your paintbrush. A little bit is all you need. That's how much I got on my brush, just a teeny bit. So I'm gonna go into this painting again with that little bit of black. I'm gonna come right to one of these edges on my hat, add a streak of black. It's already gonna take me to a darker, more maroon red. I'm gonna go back and forth. I'm gonna blend this in, just to one half of the hat. I don't wanna make the whole hat dark red. I wanna just make half so that we can see the difference between that more vibrant original red and that darker maroonish cranberry red, so that we can see the detail in our hat. So I'm just doing one side. And if you're finding that you're not liking this, you don't have to do this step. You can kind of let your painting dry, or as we're getting ready to head into a quick break in a second, let your painting dry. And when it dries, just go back over it with that regular red. If you're not liking this, or if this is not kind of working for you like you thought it would, then just go ahead and reset it by letting this paint dry and painting over it again with your normal red. Acrylic paint is very, very flexible. It's very, very forgiving. Once it dries, you can paint right over it with a couple layers of paint and make it brand new. So we got our tone in here. I want to go just a little bit darker with my tone so it's more noticeable from your end. So I'm going in with a teeny bit more black right to those same spots. I'm just going to mix in just a little bit more black so that there's more of a tone and difference. And then from here, I'm going to go in with a little bit of black to my wine and add a little bit of black to the bottom U shape of that wine. Just a teeny bit of black at a time. And then I can go a little bit in the drips. And then I'm going to blend those together. So now my wine looks a bit deeper, more like a red wine instead of like blood. And then can actually take a lot more red, that deep red, that blacken that red in that wine, just because most red wines, of course, are naturally a lot darker. So I'm adding in a tone, and in a second, I got one more step before I give this painting a quick break to dry, and then I'm gonna finish it off. So I got my tone, which is my darker red on my hat, my darker red mixed into my wine. I have a tone of that gray mixed into my brim of my Santa hat, as well as the puffball on the Santa hat. The next thing I wanna do is make something called a highlight, which is just simply adding white to this red paint while it's still wet. To add a highlight, instead of mixing black, we're mixing red. So we're going to rinse off our paintbrushes, tap it on the side of your cup, dab both sides off on your paper towel, and with the cleanest paintbrush, we're gonna grab just a small touch of red, about as much red, I'm sorry, a small touch of white. I keep mixing up my colors, sorry about that. Small touch of white, about the same amount we did with black. And we're gonna come right back into our hat, and right in those other areas that are not that darker tone, mix some white. It'll make that red a lot more vibrant, and it'll make it pop. Again, you don't have to do this step if you don't want to, but if you do, it will make your painting come to life a lot more. I'm gonna do the same thing in the wine, a little bit of white paint, It's gonna mix right in. And I'm kind of doing it in a random fashion because the more random I am, the more it's gonna look like a painting, if that makes sense. The harder you try to control this paint, the more obvious it'll look that it's not a natural painting. So what I've learned with painting over the years is you have to just kind of let go of control. Now, I know a lot of you may not be regular painters, and that's okay. But try your best not to overthink this. If you ever taken any of my in-person classes or in-person paint parties, events, or any of these mobile other paint parties, then I say this frequently. Just kind of let go of control and do your best not to overthink this. So from here, we're gonna pause and let the rest of the painting dry. Believe it or not, we're like 92% done with this painting. And that didn't take much time. We're looking at right now, so far in, we're about just under 30 minutes. So 30 minutes for this so far is pretty good. So we'll let this dry. If you'd like, you can add a few more touches to your painting before you let it dry. But it's very, very important that you take a step back, let that painting dry so that we can finish. When we come back from our break, we're going to do another layer on our background, add some different lines, and finish up our painting. So again, we are going to take a break with this painting, and when we come back, we're gonna go ahead and finish it off. So I'll see you on the other half of the video.